Welcome to Hospitality on the Rise, the podcast about the people shaping the hospitality industry and their journeys. I'm your host, Alice Cheng, founder and CEO of Culinary Agents, hospitality's go-to hiring platform. And I'm here to give you your dose of virtual mentorship. Here, we'll be sharing the stories, lessons learned, and advice from hospitality leaders who've carved out their own path to success. After all, this industry is where many get their start and go on to do incredible things. Whether you're a pro, starting out, or just love the hustle, this podcast highlights what makes hospitality extraordinary: the people. We are so excited to have Arjav Ezekiel with us today. He's the co-owner and beverage director of Birdie's in Austin, 2023 Food and Wine's Restaurant of the Year, 2022 Bon Appetit's and Esquire's Best New Restaurants in America, 2021 New York Times and 2021 Restaurant List, and then Arjav himself, 2022 Wine Guru of the Year in Esquire. I'm sure I'm missing some. I see some more notes here, but I'll let Arjav share some of these things himself. Arjav, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we are lucky to have you because you have had a very colorful career so far, and you're doing, by the looks of it, you're doing pretty well. So we want to hear about how you got here and what keeps you going. So tell me, how did it all begin?
It's a good question. So I grew up in an Indian household, and I think, like most Asian cultures, food and hospitality are kind of at the centerpiece of everything we did growing up. My parents are the greatest entertainers I've ever met, and I think I was caught by the bug very, very early on in my life. My parents are both incredible cooks too. So when I was in high school, I picked up a gig at a French bistro cooking, believe it or not, on the other side of the pass, just to kind of experience like restaurant culture. And I was totally enamored with it, but felt the need to go to college and, try and pursue a career, quote unquote. So I went to college in Ohio at a small liberal arts college called Kenyon. But, one of the stories that's come out over the last couple of years that I've told is I was an undocumented immigrant, so didn't have the ability to go into the legal field or politics kind of as I had once dreamt of once I graduated. Um, and so with the encouragement of my parents, went back to restaurants because they knew how much I loved it, how much it meant to me. So started my career in Washington, D.C. after college, thinking I wanted to go into the legal field there. Pivoted to working for Wolfgang Puck for a year at a restaurant called The Source, which was right behind the museum. And that gave me kind of like, those were my training wheel days. Learned how to wait tables. I was a terrible waiter when I first started. Couldn't get seat numbers right. Couldn't do anything right. Got yelled at every single day. But a very important part of my process. And I think I was incredibly driven like from that moment. And I knew I was like, okay, this is probably going to have to be my path because of the fact that I was undocumented. Restaurants are probably the easiest path if you're in that position. But I said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to try and be the best I can at it and make this a real career. So I committed really early on in my, like probably 6 months into my career, like my waiting job, that like this is what I was going to do for a living. I was really happy that I did that. Spent a year at The Source, got my training wheels off, and then moved to a restaurant called Comey for 4 years, which was probably the most important 4 years of my life and kind of teaching me about what hospitality really meant. I would say two of my great mentors were at that restaurant. Learned about hospitality not just as like something we did in the dining room, but as like a true force for good, and a true craft and an art. Um, and about 4 years in, I was like, man, I freaking love this. Like, I want to now see if I could take this to New York and do what I like, see if I can do it there, right? Like in a bigger market. I think anybody who's in restaurants at some point says, okay, I want to go play with the big dogs. So I moved to New York in 2015 to help open Untitled at the Whitney Museum, where I think you and I first met.
Yep.
Um, and was part of the opening team there. That's where I met my now wife, Tracy. She was a sous chef there. I was still a captain when I started. We didn't start dating till I was part of the management team, so no HR problems. And then about 18 months in, I was promoted to the management team at Gramercy Tavern. So that was kind of my New York experience, and then moved to Austin in 2018, very much with the hopes of opening Birdie's someday. We opened Birdie's in 2021, summer of 2021. So we're almost 4 years old now.
Wow. Thank you. I didn't even want to ask any follow-on questions. That was a really tight summary. Thank you. I was going to ask you, were you part of the fancy sock club at Untitled?
I
You know,
was not part of the Fancy Sock Club, and I still regret it to this day, but that was an Eduardo Portocarrero specialty that, uh, I also one of my mentors, uh, but I missed that era.
yeah. Yeah. And when you own and operate your own project, when did you kind of get more into the beverage side of things? Because, I'm seeing these little accolades, but you didn't talk a little bit about your love for wine and how that happened.
It's a good question. Part of the reason you don't see any of that is Birdie's is my first beverage job. I have always been around, great beverage people. John Reagan, Sabato Segaria, Eduardo, Kyle Wilson at Comey. I think I've had like a lot of great beverage mentors, but I didn't realize they were mentors till Birdie's opened. It's a funny story really quickly. When we opened Birdie's, Tracy asked, she was like, okay, what do you want your title to be? I'm obviously the executive chef. Like, do you want to be the general manager? What do you want to do? And I was like, I want to be director of operations. She's like, what? Like, we have like a 80-seat restaurant. What are you operating? She was like, why don't you do the wine list? And I was, when we opened Birdie's, this may be a lesson to some of the listeners who are thinking about opening their own restaurant someday. Um, I had never I had a lot of even to this day, even like with my beer nomination, everything, like I still have like a little bit of imposter syndrome because I'd never done this as a professional. But Tracy encouraged me to just put stuff on a list that I like loved, and that it could evolve as I kind of understood the restaurant better, understood myself better, understood our audience better, and understood wine better. And so with Tracy's encouragement, she was like, I want, like, why don't you try doing something that makes you really uncomfortable? Be the beverage director. You're going to run hospitality. Like, that's like your secret weapon and the thing that you're great at, but do something you're not great at the beginning, or don't think you can be great at, and challenge yourself. So Birdie's was the first time I've ever put together a wine list, the first time I've ever directed a beverage program. And yeah, like I think that's why that's a kind of a gaping hole in my resume around wine. But I think I've learned a lot over the last 4 years about wine, and I think I'm really proud of the program we've built as a restaurant.
Yeah, and that's a great example of, well, A, having a great, business partner, life partner, person in your sport in general to kind of push
Totally,
you out of your comfort zone. But then also B is, through osmosis or just through your network and being exposed to all these things. I'm sure as you were doing this and as you continue to do it, you're like you're having that like oh, I remember being part of this conversation, or I like this, and I remember being educated in this way, or listening to one of my mentors say. So it's such an important thing to remind yourself and everyone that go out of your comfort zone. You never know. You never know what's going to
totally,
happen.
totally. And I think it's also like a good reminder to like, and I remember, I like think about this, and I share with our team a lot. Like, you never know where you end up, right? I think when you're like year two in your career, you get restless. You're thinking about, oh my God, like I don't want to be a waiter for the rest of my life, or I don't want to just be a line cook for the rest of your life. If like, and there was an opportunity for me to do that, I think I would have been fine with it. But I think very early on, I was like, I want to own my own restaurant because I like being independent. I don't like being told what to do. Uh, but along the way, I think, I through osmosis picked up so much because I think the thing I was really careful about is who I worked for along the way. And I think working with the best people naturally puts you into places where you're going to learn, and I think it's really important. and I'm glad, like this is something I did when I was younger, was I didn't really pay attention to my paycheck as much as I did who I was surrounding myself with.
Yeah, and that's another really important thing, in general. I mean, obviously, do what you need to do. Everyone has their own, personal priorities and stuff. But commonly, if you're very intentional about, where you want to learn from, who you want to work with, who you want to surround yourself with. I mean, usually the snowball effect and the ripple effects of that is in the direction that you want to continue to move in.
Totally.
Great. So, so you said you knew early on that you wanted to have your own business. What was that like? Because not only did you open your own business, so you did in a city or that you I know that Tracy's from the Texas area, but you personally didn't work much in the Austin, and it's a totally different market, as you know. And what were some of the challenges that you guys had when you were opening Birdies?
Oh man, so many. So we moved here in 18. Birdie's opened in 21, but we signed our lease in February of 2020. So this was like 2.5, 3 weeks before everything shut down. Um, so we had a lot of time to think about what we wanted the future of restaurants to look like. So, I think we had a lot of challenges, but Tracy and I made it a point to try and frame them as opportunities. And I think one of the things we kept asking ourselves is like, how do we remake a restaurant to be sustainable for us as owners? And if it's just like the thesis was, if it's sustainable for us as owners, it becomes more sustainable for all of the stakeholders, right? I think for a long time, it's either been investors up front or your team up front. And I think it's wonderful to frame things like that, but I don't think it's necessarily realistic because if you don't have a functional business with a great margin, you really can't take care of any of the stakeholders. And the most important stakeholder in a lot of ways is the us, it's Tracy and me, because we're in the business every single day. And if we're miserable, no one's happy, right? So I think we saw like what was happening in COVID, and everyone was talking about this great reset. And we thought a lot of restaurants would come out of COVID with kind of new, innovative business models. But one of the things we thought about was like, okay, what is a counter service fine dining restaurant? Like that was the big question: is if we can figure out labor and how to control labor, then we have a ton of opportunity to take care of all those stakeholders. So, Birdie's is a fine dining counter service restaurant. So people stand in line, they order at a counter, they get a flag, and once they sit down, it feels like a full service restaurant where you get hospitality, a coursed meal, and then we have a 350 bottle wine list. But all of it happens at the counter. So we've used that year before we opened as an opportunity to ask ourselves some big questions, innovate around the business model, and then obviously like raising money was really challenging at that time, like asking people for checks, um, you know, during the worst possible time for restaurants was really challenging, but it made us resilient. It made us creative. It forced us to reduce, how much we were raising. And I think all of those things were to our benefit once we opened, because we opened a really lean restaurant and we've been able to like grow over the years as our business has grown, but we didn't start from a place of we have to hit this like in sales every day or we're going to go under. It was like, we're going to be fine. We created a really, really great like break even for us. Like we thought about the downside more than we like worried about the upside. And I think that was a good lesson for us and something that I think we'll take to our future businesses is like, if you worry more about your downside, the upside is all winning.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I'm gonna circle back with your last comment with your future businesses there when we talk about what's next. But, so you mentioned, earlier on in that statement about, making sure that everyone is taken care of, especially, arguably the most important folks, the folks who are putting it together in there every day. How do you find I don't wanna use the word balance, right? Because that implies that everything's equal parts, but how do you find your personal, like, balance?
It's a good question. I think part of it is like we've built it into the business model, right? So we're only open 5 days a week. We're only open for dinner. We close the restaurant for 4 weeks every year, and everybody on the team gets paid planned vacation for that. So we close for 2.5 weeks in August, and then we close during the holiday. So everyone gets to spend Christmas and New Year's with their family. That was like a really important thing for us. And we pay people enough, not to get rich, but enough to pay their rent. Historically, it's been like $15 an hour for 40-hour weeks for anybody on the team. That's full time. Part time, it's kind of prorated based on an 8-hour day, but everyone gets to spend that time with their family. So I think part of what counter services allowed us to do is it's allowed us to bake some of these things into the business model. People get subsidized mental, like healthcare. They get, obviously like the vacation, paid family leave, like all these things that allow you to be a human being. I think that was really important because we went through like our own life growth as we opened this restaurant. We had a baby, we had, a mortgage. And I think as we were kind of going through our own life journey, we were really aware of the fact that the only way to make those things harmonize with restaurant work was to create programs and facilities that allow everybody on the team to participate in the same thing Tracy and I were going through. So, Tracy and I are on the same insurance program as the rest of the team. Like that was an important thing. I was like, if we're not happy with our insurance, I'm not going to ask my team to sign up for some sucker insurance. You know what I mean? So I think you used the word like we're the most important people in the totem. I would reframe that and say we use our own life to kind of inform, for better or worse, like some of the other things that we try and share with our team. But if we're very much founded on the idea that the team is the most important on a day-to-day basis. But the thesis of how we began this restaurant was if we can't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of our team. It's kind of like the airline oxygen mask, reference where you have to be able to put your oxygen mask on yourself before you could help anybody else. I think coming out of COVID and like hearing about like, the talk of that time was about the toxicity in restaurants. And I think Tracy and I like really believed that began and ended with ownership, not having the space to breathe, to think about how to be great people because they were under such tremendous stress for such extended periods of time. And that doesn't justify anything, but we didn't want to fall into that trap.
Yeah, yeah. And, it's interesting because when you talk to leaders and business owners who are either starting at the time of the, 2019 or 2020 into now versus people who, were started way before and trying to figure out how do we, accommodate and be flexible, et cetera. And how you set up your business from the beginning really does impact, inform, and influence how you're able to and what you're able to do. And that subsequently also affects, potentially the success of your business, right? And the way that you're able to attract people who want to work for you and the culture that you set up for your team. So,
That's right.
um,
Yeah,
bravo for that.
I think like, one realization, I've talked about this a couple of times, but restaurant models haven't really changed since antiquity. You know what I mean? Like it's been the same business model, but everything else around restaurants has changed. So what I think we're going to see over the next 10 years is like restaurants trying different things, restaurants innovating around business model. And I think you're going to see that at the higher and higher end, right? I think there was a choice people were trying to make early on between like quick service restaurants, and the Shake Shack and Sweetgreen model versus like full service restaurants. And I think the truth is there's a happy medium between those two ends. And I think it's up to each restaurateur to kind of pick and choose what pieces are important to them. For us, it was, the quality of product we're delivering and the hospitality and experience around those two things. So for us, it's hospitality, food, beverage. Service is the piece we were willing to compromise, because as I grow older and maybe a little more curmudgeonly, I like having some space when I eat. I don't necessarily need somebody hovering over me all the time, but I like having someone there to enhance my experience and make sure I have everything I need.
I mean, just like you said, everything has changed, right? The even diners' preferences or what they're willing to try and what they're more open to has also changed, right?
For sure.
And folks like yourself and yourself included are pioneering and helping people understand like you can have this type of experience, which is some happy medium, and that's how you define. So kudos to you and the team. And you have uh, clearly been and continue to draw upon a lot of experiences over the years in the different cities you've worked at. Can you think of like any one or I know many pieces of advice that you might have gotten from one of your mentors over the years as you were going through, you know, opening your restaurant or anything along the way?
Yeah, I think Kyle Wilson at Comey, one of my dear friends and mentors, very early on helped reframe what hospitality was. And he, I think early on was said, hospitality is about moving people. Like you have 3 hours to move people emotionally. Like that's really what it's about. And if you can figure out how to do that in a meaningful way, people will never forget an experience. And I think that piece had always stuck with me. And I think that's the thing that was the most addictive piece of this work for me is that every single day I have an opportunity to do something special, cool, meaningful for people where I can leave them a little more excited, delighted, happy than when they arrive at my restaurant. I think that was a really meaningful, thing for me. I think over the years, I've had people like Sabato, Eduardo, John Reagan, like they've always invested in me, whether that's like, hey, I'm gonna have coffee with you and we're gonna talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I think having those relationships, I think that's one of the no one ever like overtly said that to me, but I think one of the things that I've know has been deeply meaningful to me over the years, Mike Anthony was like my personal relationships with people I've worked with and how often people in hospitality are willing to show up for each other. So I think, as young people are thinking about building their careers, I think, like I said earlier, thinking about who you work with is really important. And then raise your hand and say, hey, do you have time for coffee with me? I want to pick your brain about it. And then show up prepared with like things you want to talk about. But, I think I maybe was a little too precocious in moments, but I think it served me well in the sense that, I pulled Saab aside and I was like, hey, I wanna like spend some time with you and I wanna like learn from you. And then I did the follow-up work and like reached out to him and I was like, hey, can we set up some time for coffee? And then, over time, Saab would reach out to me and be like, hey, we haven't caught up in a while. Let's catch up. I want to see how you're doing. Same thing with Eduardo, same thing with John. And I think those relationships to this day, like when Saab comes to the restaurant, it's like so meaningful because Saab's seen me kind of grow from, a captain to like an owner. And I think those moments and those relationships are the most meaningful part of this work for me. And I think for a lot of people who end up in the dining room.
Yeah, that's so important to remember too. It's 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 the give and take. It's the ask, but then it's also do your homework. Like you're and when someone is giving you their time, think about what you would like them to help you with or what you want to discuss with them. And I agree. I think more so in hospitality than I've ever seen. People are willing and ready and excited to spend time to help, you know,
Yeah. And I
each
think
other
like,
and whatever.
I totally agree with you. And I think like, one of the secrets, like I had a couple of people ask me in the last month, I think is going to be the most important piece of the next decade for restaurants. And I think reinvesting in the dining room, like there's so much kitchen talent now, but I think, the thing that differentiates a restaurant now is like the dining room. And I think you're going to see the comeback of like kind of the old school maitre d'. And I think it's really, really important that we start investing in the dining room and teaching hospitality at a really high level because I think it is the thing that separates restaurants from each other now. Like it's like how warm a dining room is, and I think you can have all the technical things you want in the world, but if there's no warmth, it's just flat. And I think it's something that people are born with, but you can teach how to like be precise with warmth. And that's something I think we take a lot of pride in at our restaurant and we want to continue to kind of build upon.
Great, great. When that segues me into how do you keep learning and growing and staying inspired?
It's an easy thing to stay inspired, actually. I think for me, because I'm, one, I get to go home to like a really brilliant chef and business partner in my wife Tracy, uh, who is always also pushing herself in her field. So If I'm not pushing myself, I'm the guy who's like falling behind or being lazy. So I think that's really helpful. I think eating out is a really important part of the experience of being inspired for me. We were just in New Orleans, and every time I go out to eat, I learn something, I'm inspired by something, and then conversations with people like you. I think conversations with people around restaurants, people I'm speaking at the chef conference in a week in Philadelphia, and I think last year I walked away from that conference feeling so excited and motivated and energized because of the new people I'd met and all the cool stuff people were doing. I think conversations are really inspiring and moving to me, and then dining out experiences are really inspiring and moving to me.
Yeah, I love it. And, I think now for a little bit, it's kind of evened out now, but it was like right after things started, coming out of COVID, dare I say, there were like all these events. There's so many
Totally.
events. And now it's kind of coming to its new
How do you? I
scheduling.
mean, I'm curious actually. Like, how do you stay inspired? Because like you're at this like really interesting nexus of like food, hospitality, and tech, and I'm sure you kind of feel moved by different people in each of that like corners of that triangle. I'm just kind of curious, like, does that change on a day to day, month to month basis, depending on where the business is, like whether it's someone in tech or food or
No,
life?
I mean, that's a great question. I have never had somebody turn it back on me. Thank you. I mean, people like you, this industry is so inspiring. I mean, started the company largely to help people in this industry find better jobs, connect with employers, give employers tools to do things more efficiently and effectively and save money and time. And it has, this is our 13th year. It has changed. It has evolved over the years, but the core is still the same. You have really excited folks who are trying to either make their mark or start their career, grow their career, and they're lacking tools. So being able to give them tools, access to information, connect them directly with employer, share stories like yours that inspire them, like that's the best, right? Oh, I didn't know that, that they could do this, and talking to talent who may be at a point in their life where it's like, I don't know, if this is the thing, and it's hard, and being able to show them examples, like real examples of people they already look up to, and say like, this is what they went through, right? It's common. It's for me, the benefit and what's super aspiring is that we're like, one, I could take a step back and I could see all these pieces moving around, and myself and team, we play the game of how do we connect the pieces, and we just sit back and watch the aha moments, and from a tech standpoint, we started to the company largely because we just wanted to provide the best tech in the most user friendly possible way that was customized for this industry. Right? The industry is special, it has really unique nuances and challenges, both from the job seeker as well as the hiring manager. And we were like, you guys all deserve better tools. Like you really do.
Yeah,
Too busy taking care of other people. Let somebody else take care of you, this industry for a change, and that's
there you
kind of
go.
here we
There's the
are.
hospitality. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking before when you were coughing a little bit, I went to reach for my water to give to you, and I'm like, yes, that's not
Thank you.
working.
I appreciate that. No, I think this is like it's interesting to hear you say that because I think one of the things that you're saying, like one of the things that like what you're saying is rooted in is you have to really be passionate about what you're doing, right? And if you're passionate about what you're doing, inspiration is everywhere. And I think but like it's rooted in really loving the work. To me, and I say this all the time, like I think the restaurant industry is the best, greatest industry in the world. It has the best
Yep.
people. It has the best, most generous people in the world. It has the most loving, caring people I've ever met, and I stand by that. Right? Like I think that like there is no better industry than working in restaurants. Now, does it take a certain kind of person to be like really successful in restaurants? Absolutely. But if you are that person and you're lucky enough to fall into the restaurant industry, like I think I'm an example of that, you find so much meaning from life and meaning in this world by being surrounded by people that are high achieving and care about the same things that you do. And I think restaurants are such a light in this moment of time where there feels like there's so much darkness around us, where you have the power to change someone's day for the better. And I think that is a meaningful, powerful thing that restaurants need to be talking more about so that we can continue to be beacons and important pieces of light in our society, in our communities, and that we're also given the respect by our societies and community that we deserve.
I love that. I mean, I would end right there if I didn't have quick fire questions for
Let's
you.
go.
But you're absolutely right. I couldn't have said it better myself. What advice would you tell your younger self?
Be patient.
What's your advice for someone struggling in the industry?
Struggling in what way?
Oh, is that a question back to me?
Yeah,
Or are you
like
asking them?
I'm asking you, like, struggling
In
in what way? Like trying to find purpose, or like struggling with the hours, struggling with
yeah,
what?
I mean, I guess it's struggling with what? Right? What are depending on what they're struggling with. Let's
I
say they're struggling with continuing in the industry.
Yeah, I think ask yourself, some important questions. Like, what about this work is tough? Does getting out of the industry solve that problem for you? Uh, I think people who are like, I've struggled in this industry, like I'm passionate about it, but it doesn't mean I haven't struggled or asked myself questions because of what the outside noise is telling you. It's like, oh, this is something that is not a meaningful career. Like if that's the reason you're struggling because you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to just do this for the rest of my life, then like, I think it's important to be like, okay, I need to have goals and set goals and have mentors who can get me there. If you're struggling with the hours, I think, part of it is like, hey, do I really want to do this for a living? I think that's an important question to ask yourself, right? I think it's not for the faint of heart, but, I think if you're going to go be a lawyer and sit at a desk all day and work 80 hours a week, that's its own kind of misery and pain. So I think like, anything you do in your early 20s when you're starting your career is going to be a little bit grueling. I think asking yourself early and often, like, hey, am I on the right path? Do I care about what I'm doing? What am I working towards? I think it's totally fine to be in restaurants and be kind of struggling. If you're like, oh, I'm actually not passionate about restaurants. What I really want to be is an actor, right? That's what I'm passionate about. Restaurants pay the bill. That's fine. Like, I think focus on the thing that you care about and you're passionate about, and then like get to that place, but ask yourself tough questions like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing it? What do I want to be? I think asking yourself that question over and over again is important.
What's your advice for fellow hospitality leaders?
Think about yourself too, make sure you're good. Chris Shepard always asks that question when he sees people. He's like, you good? And I think it's an important question to ask yourself more often. The work, like we've talked about, is hard and can be tiring sometimes. And I think one of the things I've done over the last year is make sure I'm investing in taking care of myself more often. And I think that's a really important thing for all of us in leadership positions to be asking.
With that, thank you so much, Arjav, for taking the time to share your insights, your career path. I know it's going to be very valuable and inspiring for our audience.
Thanks for having me, Alice. It was a pleasure.
Remember, success looks different for everyone in hospitality. No two paths are the same. If you have a leader or a topic you want to hear about, email media@culinaryaagents.com. Hospitality on the Rise is brought to you by Culinary Agents, connecting top talent with employers since 2012. Whether you're hiring or looking for your next opportunity, join us at culinaryaagents.com. For more inspiration, subscribe to Hospitality on the Rise and visit hospitalitycareerpaths.com, a free platform by Culinary Agents. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. And if you loved this episode, share it with someone who could use a little inspiration.